creators, for thy many blessings. Thanking you for protecting us along life's way, sustaining and blessing us each day. Thanking you for talking to the Supreme Being, asking for our continuous protection. Thanking you for the pains that we had to bear. Thank you for the suffering with us you did share. Thank you for the might of the red, the might of the black, and the might of the green. Oh, our ancestors, oh, our divine creator, we thank you. We ask you, as we think of those who begat those, who begat those, who begat those, who begat us, we ask you to give us a special strength. Give us a special sense of togetherness. Let us realize that the word should not be we shall overcome, but we will overcome. Because we're moving forward with the might of the red, the black, and the green. We are an African people. And with great county color we say, as we think of this day and our origin, oh Africa, you must be free. Too many years of misery. Africa, my mother's land, we yearn to tread your golden sands. The Creator has promised, and it must be. All Africans must be free. These blessings we ask to those who begat those, who begat those, who begat those, who begat us. And we hereby commit ourselves so that every rung will go higher and higher. We ask you to bless this occasion and all the functions that will be a part of this occasion. We ask you to bless Medgar Evers College. Protect us with your love divine. Ashe, Ashe. Let it be so. Let it be so.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Umalu, for the blessing on these events. Now, the provost.
Good afternoon. Queen Mother Umalu reminds us of the obvious, that is that we are an African people, and as such we have a responsibility to call on our ancestors whenever we participate in any program of this sort, any ritual, any activity of significance. And indeed, this afternoon's program is of significance. We begin our celebration of African American or African History Month. President Jackson is not able to be with us today, although he'll be here for some of our other programs. He's asked me to welcome him on his behalf on behalf of the Congress. It's a pleasure for me to do that. As I've already suggested, this is a very important occasion as we focus during this month, the shortest month of the year, on the experiences of Africans. As most of you know, we focus on our experiences throughout the year. There's a particular strong focus during the month of February. So we want to encourage you to participate throughout the month, to encourage your friends and family members and classmates to come and join us also, because there are a number of exciting activities and informative activities planned during this month. In that light, I'd like to acknowledge the members of the Library of Black History Month. That's the big stand. Don't be shy. welcome and please participate in the other programs that we have planned for you during this month.
Thank you, Provost. Mr. Leeks.
Hi, y'all. I am really happily pleased with the title. Literacy, Technology, and African Diaspora. We created technology. Certainly, there's nothing more technologically developed in the history of the world than the pyramids. Some 10,000 years ago, we created religion. We created philosophy. Indeed, we are the most creative people in the world anywhere. But we have been separated 558 years into what we call diaspora. And it is so pleasing to see you very young, beautiful, handsome, lovely people here taking a profound interest in your history and your culture. We didn't come here as Negroes. We didn't come here as Baptists. We didn't come here as Methodists. Came here many languages, but they were ours. We came here with many philosophies, they were ours. But slavery has done something to us psychologically, physically, really, but more psychologically than physically, presently, that we must reconnect with our ancestors, as so warmly done by Dr. Emily, whom I've been knowing. But you have a responsibility. I'm talking about you, the young. Before I even go into, let me tell you something. You're looking at a man whose grandparents were born in slavery. Think about it. And I'm not that old, but my parents lived long. My name, Leeks, came from a slave master who came here from Scotland in 1790 and settled in the northern part of North Carolina, who made a fortune owning my ancestors and yours, selling us as animals, like animals, dog, horses, cows. 140 years ago, just think about it, this country sold our ancestors, our grandparents in my case. They named the town after the slave master who owned my grandfather, on my father's side, Leek. They named the town Leaksville, North Carolina. Then later on in the 60s and 70s, they took two towns, joined them together. Now it's called Eden, E-D-E-N, North Carolina. Such is the brief time that we have been out of slavery. But some of us, too many of us, are psychologically enslaved still. So it's up to you to wipe the slate clean of the white man's religion. Christianity is not your religion. Africa created a religion. Came out of the Osirian cult, which existed in Egypt for 2,000, let's see, get my figures right, they want to mislead you. 14,000 years, the Osirian cult. You must have heard of Isis, Horus, Nephthys, the Egyptian mysteries. that's where our history, religiously, psychologically, technologically, derives from, not from a slave culture. So it's up to you to become researchers, questioners. We got a long way to go and a large job to do. But you must do it. No one can do it but you. We must tell the truth, discover the truth. It's in the books, you know. It's there, but it's not going to be taught to you unless you demand it, unless you go out into the libraries of the world. Go to Egypt when you get a chance. Go to the Museum of Antiquities. It's all there. All those black folks' faces on the temple walls, they were not white. Take up the job. I don't know the gentleman. I've heard of him, but I don't know him. Never met him. Who's going to? I assume he's here. So because, which one? How you do, sir? No, I have just never have met him. But my address is directed to you. It's not all about finger popping. It's not all about bebop. It's not all about styling and profiling. You got a responsibility to reward an ancestor for the time and murder and capture and enslavement who died so that we may survive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Leaks. And I must say that it has been a pleasure working with you and your other members of the Community School Board 17. And you'll notice outside that there's a flyer that lists a phone number that you can contact for activities. I would like our musician for the day, Professor Glenn McMillan, to lead us in the Black National Anthem. Would you please all stand? And everyone. All right. I call the provost back once more to introduce our speaker, Dr. Oba Tashaka.
Hello again. I have some prepared remarks here, but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to just read them because I've known our speakers since before my hairline started to recede. I met Oba Tashaka, I guess in 1979 when I first moved to California, and over the 8 or 9 years I was in California, we worked together on a number of committees and a number of organizations, including the Bay Area Kwanzaa Committee, the Council of Independent Black Institutions. We were together in Chicago in 1981 at the founding of the National Black United Front, and a number of other local and national and international organizations. He's a dear brother, and we certainly have a lot of experiences together. Oba Tshaka is, to my mind, a true long-distance runner, and that he's been involved in our struggle since most of the people in this room, since before most of the people in this room were born. He's been consistent with that involvement. Oba Tshaka is a full professor at San Francisco State University, where he served as chair of the Black Studies Department between 1984 and 1996. As chair of Black Studies, he provided academic leadership for the department, which led to the development of an African-centered discipline that includes the natural sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics, into the core curriculum of Black Studies. He also led the move to define ancient African philosophy as the foundation of the Black Studies discipline. He holds a PhD in the philosophy of education from the Western Institute of Social Research in Berkeley, California. He's the author of 4 books: The Political Legacy of Malcolm X, The Art of Leadership, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And he's also completed his 4th book entitled Return to the African Mother Principle of Male-Female Equality, Male-Female Equality, Volume 1, which is now available. Oba Tshaka is a black movement activist whose history of struggle began in 1960. Professor Tshaka was chairman of San Francisco CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, between 1963 and 1965. As chairman of San Francisco CORE, he spearheaded a campaign for jobs for blacks and other people of color in San Francisco and throughout California. In 1966, Oba Tshaka, along with other community members, organized the Pan-African People's Organization, or PAPO, which was an umbrella organization of black businesses, black social clubs, black newspapers, and black community organizations. PAPO continues to operate and is historically significant because it consolidated the best of the black power, black nationalist, and Pan-Africanist movements with the best tactics of the civil rights movement. PAPO has fed the hungry and maintained an independent black school while mobilizing the black community against racist police and providing political support for African liberation movements. On the international level, in 1963, Dr. Tshaka led an international work project to Tanzania, made up of members of the Pan-African People's Organization. PAPO members worked in agricultural villages called Ujamaa villages. Also in 1974, Tshaka played a major leadership role in the historic 6th Pan-African Congress in Tanzania, where he served as chair of the North American Political Committee. Currently, Professor Tshaka serves as National Vice Chair for Organizing and Training for the Black United Front. The National Black United Front is organizing throughout the United States to bring churches, community organizations, governments, and educational institutions together. Please join me in welcoming to Medgar Evers College, Brother Dr. Oba Tshaka.
Hotep. I can't hear you. Hotep. If I could be on the road for the last 2 days and not get any sleep for the last 2 days, you all could sound like you got some soul. Hotep. Right on. It's good to be here. Brother Kofi is a brother that I really love. You all are fortunate to have a provost as conscious as this. Y'all know that? He's competent and he's conscious, and I know he's around here helping a whole lot of you. You're very fortunate. He's one of the leaders in CB, Council for Independent Black Institutions, Independent Black School Umbrella Organization. Dr. Sheila Meyer Johnson, who's here. Y'all know she's got a whole lot of soul. How many people here have her class? Isn't she bad? She's former chair of Black Studies at San Francisco State. Beautiful sister. And to all the brothers and sisters who are here, and I particularly want to say thank you to Sister Yvette Bennett for all the hard work you've done in coordinating this. We've been on the phone, now I get to see who you are. Last time I was here, it was in 1984. My book, The Political Legacy of Malcolm X, had just come out, and Dr. Sheila Meyer Johnson brought me on campus to speak, and Dr. Betty Shabazz was here, and that was very special. Also, John Oliver Killings was here. And this is an important college, you know, dedicated to Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers was one of the few members of the NAACP that stayed true to black folks in the 60s and was killed for that reason. So this is historically significant. 98% African-American college. So I want to speak about science and technology and the future of African people. As the previous speaker stated, Africans gave birth to science. We gave birth to civilization. We gave birth to the first families, the Twa people, or the Batwa, people that the Europeans call pygmies, gave birth to human civilization. And by the way, laid the foundation for the world's first educational systems, the world's most neglected people. They created the mystery systems. In Africa today, they are the initiators into the higher spiritual knowledge. If you go into Ghana and places like this, these are the little people that the Kemites say they are descended from, that came from a place called the Mountain of the Moon, that is now called Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. These are the heaviest and most just people on the planet Earth. They gave birth to civilization, because see, we treat civilization like it's skyscrapers, like it's gold, like it's monuments. Civilization is the relationship that exists between men and women. You're civilized when you treat your brothers and sisters in a civil way. Is that correct? And if you don't treat them in a civil way, you're uncivilized. One historian said this is the only society that went from barbarism to savagery without ever experiencing one solid single day of civilization. Because this society started off murdering Native Americans and enslaving Africans. And some of us now have descended to this pit of materialism where we think that what we have is what makes us something. It's who we are that makes us something. And it's where we came from that makes us something. And it's only when you know where you came from will you know where you're going. And see, I'm going to say something here, because this is a black college. This place should be packed. But you see, we have a problem. And I call it the problem of the remote control, automatic pilot, double old soul Negro. We got this Negro who's on control. He's on automatic pilot, and so is she. And the worst thing is they don't know it, and they don't want to know it. Love everybody but themselves. Want to be everything but African. Everything but black. I know there's some students here who feel that because this is a 98% African institution, there's got to be something wrong with it. We're the only people in the world who think like that. If the Chinese had a university, they'd be in here talking Chinese. They'd be keeping everybody else out. The Jews, when they had their universities, which they do, they have the same attitude. But double O soul, remote control, automatic pilot, Negro. He's always looking for somebody else to pat him on the head before they believe that they've accomplished anything. So I want to say to you that it's important to master science and technology. We gave birth to it. You understand? We didn't produce a George Washington Carver by accident. He was possible because an Imhotep had preceded him. You understand? But the key things I want to get for you today is this. You can master science and technology. You can master psychology. You can master history. But you are going to be functionally illiterate if you do not first master yourself. The first science is the knowledge of who you are. Self-knowledge is the basis for all knowledge, and the true scientist knows themselves inside out. So I don't have a lot of time. The presentation that I'm giving here takes a lot more time, so I'm only going to hit the high points. This is new stuff, because I turned 60. I've been in this movement now 40 years, but I'm not into the old, except in our history, because we need to constantly change and transform. So when we talk about science and technology and its relevance for us today, what I want to focus on today is where we're weak and how we need to get strong. We have right now in this country a very strong reawakening going on among our people. Some of us call it an African-centered renaissance, or a septet. That means return to the first principles, or the first occasion, when things first began, creation. Since 1984, some of our best scholars have come forward and begun to write books using this computer technology, have started an Afrocentric movement, and you have a study group movement going on around this country. Anybody here in a study group, raise your hand. There are black people across this country, a significant number, who are meeting in their homes and in communities and reading black books that have been written by black authors. Black Enterprise magazine 2 years ago reported that 2 years ago, black people bought 160 million books written by black authors. That sounds good. I know a lot of those were novels, murder mysteries, and a whole lot of other things. But within it was also some conscious stuff. But the fact that it was 160 million, and whatever number we have, that's considerably more than there are of us, kills the story that we don't read. And guess what? It's grassroots black people who are doing most of the reading. The Negroes in college are primarily reading what their teachers tell them to read. I go to black churches and bring my books, and I leave, they bought all of them. I go to colleges, and these Negroes talk about, they can't buy no books because they too poor. But they got 1 million of these white books loading them down. You understand? And they got time to go hear a hip-hop conference, a rap show, and pay $50 or $60 to hear somebody say whatever they got to say. But they poll when it comes to their own knowledge. But there's been an African-centered renaissance. There's been an explosion of black bookstores. There is an African-centered movement in the black church, and it's centered in the South. My book, Return to the African Mother Principle, refers to this. 2 weeks ago, I was in Memphis at an African-centered church. Greater Romani Church got 8,000 members. 10 years ago, they only had 800. And they got a preacher who doesn't accept any pay. And when you come into Memphis, there's a picture of Jesus on a huge billboard. And Jesus don't look like no hippie with blonde hair and blue eyes. He looked just like us. You understand? So that there's a movement going on. There's a rites of passage movement. Fairly big, fairly large. There's an independent black school movement that preceded this and is continuing to go on. I'm in the National Black United Front, and we've been fighting to get an African-centered curriculum in the public schools and fighting to control the public schools. And here in New York, you know there's been a major battle where your governor has taken power away from the community boards and centered it in the hands of a Negro who they just got rid of. They're getting ready to bring in some other Negro. You understand? So that as we wage the struggle, they have counterattacked with their not out of Africa, with their disuniting of America. You're all familiar with this. You're Leonard Jeffries and a host of others. I come from the mothership of black studies for four-year colleges, where black studies began at a four-year college. They tried to take us out in 90 through 92. We kicked their butt. Right now, we have our president at San Francisco State, who has just agreed to support a black study initiative to put a couple $100,000 a year for 10 years into an intervention project in the public schools for 1st to 12th grade, where we'll be going in the public schools and teaching our kids after school literacy, math, history, and culture. You understand? But that's not what I'm here to talk about. See, Negroes like to hear the good news. But the fact is, we're in terrible shape. And we want to get out of this condition we're in, as strong as we are. We're the mothers of the popular culture in this country, along with Native Americans. Everybody jumps according to us, whether they should be jumping or not. But the fact is, we got an African-centered renaissance going on. But here's our crisis. We have a Eurocentric way of imparting the information that we know. Our independent black schools, and CB is the best of them. Our organization has one of the CBs. Kofi has been involved and is involved in CB and has run an independent black institution. But our independent black schools are trying to teach in an African way, but fundamentally, we know how to impart information. But we're not so good at dealing with how we involve our youth in the process of transformation. Education is not about information, education's about transformation. That's why Malcolm X was better educated in prison than most Negroes are in universities, because he died as a Negro and was reborn as an African. And that is really the basis of education. So our African-centered schools, our CBs, they are the things that are most independent. If there's one, I don't know, but there are probably very few of our CBs that center their curriculum around African philosophy. You cannot have an independent black school with an independent black curriculum if your thought is not the center of what drives that school. And African philosophy is what drives the discipline of African-centered thought. In fact, the premier text for Black Studies, Introduction to Black Studies, outstanding book, but not one chapter on African philosophy. In fact, there are very few Black Studies departments in this country that recognize Black Studies as the lead discipline in the discipline of Black Studies, which is saying that we've got some kind of attitude about whether or not we produce great black thinkers. I recall Martin Luther King saying, black people have produced no great black thinkers in America. If you buy that, then you are really on a psychological plantation. You mean Martin R. Delaney wasn't a great black thinker? You mean Henry Highland Garnett wasn't a great black thinker? You hear me? And a host of others? You mean the W.B. Du Bois wasn't a great black thinker? Huh? I mean, what are you talking about? So the thing is, we got to understand that while we are putting forward some very positive African-centered thought, I think it's so positive that I can safely predict before I'm in the grave, and it's going to be a while before I'm in the grave, my generation will put forward a worldview. First, oppressed people on the planet that put forward a worldview before we built the society. Most people need the society to have the confidence to build a worldview. But we know we need the worldview so that we have in our heads the outline of the society that we want to build. Because if we don't, we will reproduce this madness. Am I telling the truth? So we're in a crisis. And it's a crisis that's got us trapped. The black church, it's African-centered. Certain black churches, a minority, but they're drawing on African-centered thinkers. But the fact of the matter is, they departed from the old black church tradition that knew more about African-centered pedagogy or methods of transforming people than now. Because they used to have the wailing bench in the church, and you could not become a member of the church until you had been possessed by the Spirit, until you had been transformed. See, Christians have a saying, except that ye be reborn again, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now a Negro enter the kingdom of a plush Baptist or holiness church, and all he has to have is his name and some dead presidents. Am I telling the truth? You know what I mean? So, we've kind of departed from our way. So what I want to talk about is the technology, the science of the African mind and the African spirit. And what is it in this deep well of our culture that we need to tap so that we can go forward? How is it that we can move to get back to the transformative process so that education is about liberating mind and spirit? Because the key thing we're weak in is not knowing how to get to the spirit. You understand? The Western educational project is about teaching the mind. The African educational project is about the transformation of mind, spirit, and body. And it all occurs all at once. And the classroom is inherently limited as these square walls are. Square. The cosmos don't look like this. That's why most people do better outside these walls. But we can do a lot better inside these walls if we go, as the rap artists say, not back to the future, but black to the future. Is that right? We got to go black to go forward. and we're going to go forward into blackness. So this is the main theme I'm getting into. Flip this on. And don't write this down, because if you write this down, you're not going to get the point. This is one thing students don't know about lectures. They write everything down somebody said. That ain't what you do. Absorb it. I'm working now on my 5th book, and I've been talking to Asa Hilliard a lot about this, and Wade Nobles. And this book is on pedagogy. Now, the first thing is, pedagogy is a big word. Europeans, by pedagogy, they mean system of instruction. If that's what you mean, you're in a trap, because you're back to information. And even if you get Afrocentric information, all you're going to get is biofeedback. People are going to feed back Afrocentric information. But in ancient Kemet, turn that light off for a minute, and then you put it back on. In ancient Kemet, they had a term for pedagogy, and it was called SEVA, S-V-A. And because there's no vowels in Medu-Neter, we use the term S-E-V-A, SEVA. It means to instruct. But as Dr. Theophilo Benga, who became chair of Black Studies at San Francisco State, Dr. Cheikana Diop's best student, written 17 books, speaks 10 languages, as he notes, because he teaches a course on Medu-Neter, he said that when they portray in the writing of ancient Kemet, and Medu-Neter is the language of Kemet, it means divine language. African people believe that our philosophy is based on speech, and all speech derives from God. So divine language is the language of God. And then there is Medu-Neter. Medu-Neter is divine language. Medu-Neter is the good language, or the sacred language. It's the language that people speak that approximates the language of God. And you know, our parents always told us not to use words that were an insult to God, because we've always understood language is sacred. And we have sayings, what goes around comes around. Be careful what you say, because it can happen. Is that right? Speech has power. So the thing is, in ancient Kemet, philosophy is based on the word. Seba is an instruction of the word. The word that approximates the language of God, the good word. Now, as Dr. Theophilo Benga points out, when they, in Medu-Neter, portray instruction, there are many symbols they use. One is there's always a teacher with a stick. And you all know what that means, because that reminds you of certain teachers, black teachers, used to have. Isn't that right? You get it right, or else. That was the at-Seba schools. Those were the lower schools of education. But occasionally, sometimes, when they portray Seba, they have a star. And the star has a head, it has 2 arms, a trunk, and a leg. And I said to Obenga, that's an interesting star. That looks like a person. And Obenga said, yes, he thought about that. Well, the notion of education in Africa, and the notion of education that old-time blacks who used to know how to teach us, and some who still do, and some of them are teaching you right here, and you need to support them. The notion of real education is the light, bringing the light that is within out. It is the notion that each student is a miniature universe, a star within the larger cosmos, not a Hollywood star, a heavenly star. And the goal of education is to cultivate the gifts of the student, to bring the light out, not as in enlightenment, that's a European concept, but as in destiny. In Kemet, they call it Ka. Among the Yoruba, they call it Ori. And African people believe, and there's a lot of parapsychological research. See, we got to deal with the spiritual. You cannot talk about transformation if you do not deal with the spiritual. People who have died and come back, you've heard about this, where people's hearts stop beating. And they've given accounts of what happened. There's thousands of these cases in operating rooms and everything else. And some people have gone to the spirit realm. Good people have gone to the realm of the light. And they talk about embracing a spirit of light that Christians call God, Jesus. And depending on your religious faith, you'll define that. A Buddhist would probably call that Buddha, But the thing is, some have gone to this realm and have witnessed spirits in the presence of God entering into agreements on their destiny in life. And they've seen these same spirits enter the wombs of their parents and then forget their destiny. And the Yorubas call this Ori. I believe this is true. I think that we pick our parents. You know, I think that we made a decision in the presence of God why we're here. We chose to be black. We chose this destiny. We chose it for a reason. You don't remember it because the task of every human being in life is to remember where you came from. You didn't just come from Africa, you came from heaven. You hear what I'm telling you? The Zulu people. The name Zulu means heavenly people. African people all believe we come from the spirit realm as spirits and we enter this body. And so education has got to deal with the spiritual realm. Now, so 7 is about enlightenment. Now, I was writing this book, Return to the African Mother Principle of Male and Female Equality, which is the hardest thing I ever wrote. And it's dealing with just African societies and African family systems. It provides the only paradigm for our family systems in the world based on empirical research. But it comes from spiritual guidance, but a lot of research. And while I was doing it, I was doing research on black music. I love black music. It's one of my first loves, because you got to understand something. Our music contains the richest amount of Africanism in America among our people. Because the way slavery worked in this country, us being on small plantations, more of the culture was attacked. But we held on to more of it through the music than anywhere else. But we held on it all over the place. And so, as I write, I always take my mind off by dealing with something else. So I'm reading a book on jazz. Jazz is something I really love, black classical music. So I'm reading a book called Thinking in Jazz. And in this book, there's this great jazz black classical musician called Walter Bishop. And Bishop is describing the system that made a John Coltrane, system that made a Miles Davis, a system that made a Billie Holiday. And I found out later, the system that made John Henrik Clarke, that made Malcolm X. You hear me? That has made any master that's achieved mastery. The brother that cuts my hair went through the same system. See? And I read it. And when I read it, I said, because I'll put it up on the board in just a minute. And I said, I read the next paragraph. And then, see, I've been in the Dogon system now 38 years. Dogon system is a system, all African systems are not systems you memorize. They change you. They change you. And you undergo transformation. So I knew that when Walter Bishop described how these black classical players developed into mastery, I knew it was the same system I had gone through in the Dogon system. I knew it. And I ran upstairs and told my wife, and then I got on the phone, I called Asa, and it took Asa a couple of days to get back, and I'm on the toilet. He's got a cell phone on, making a lot of noise. And I said, Asa, you gotta hear this. Flick it on. This is major breakthrough here. But it's a breakthrough that comes from mining your own culture. That is, digging into, well, our culture. Can you hear me? Can you get me upstairs?
Yep.
You hear?
Go get, give me the mic. Give me the mic. You can take that mic off.
Radio mic. Can you give him a radio mic instead?
No, he's got it. He's got it.
Okay, what this does is, this piece is saying this, that the system that African Americans use in different walks of life, whether it's an athlete, whether it's a musician, whether it's a scholar, whether it's a leader, I've gone through this system, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a parent, is the same system that's used among the Dogon. So what is this? In the Dogon system, they have their philosophy and their seva is almost identical. Now, this is a real key thing to understand in African thought. Philosophy is your deep thought. It's your wisdom about your life, your place in the universe, your history. Every people have philosophy. Now, African people, the way you teach and what you teach are almost the same thing, because African philosophy, the way you learn the truth is to be the truth. European philosophy, the way you learn the philosophy is to mouth it, to repeat it, and then to get a grade on it, and get a degree on it, and then forget it. But African philosophies are transformative. So in a real sense, pedagogy or the transformative system and philosophy are one. The difference is philosophy defines the universal principles of the cosmos. And the pedagogy is the way in which you transform. But since the way you learn the philosophy is to become it, they meet, they intersect. They're not really separate. So the Dogon have what they call 4 levels. And it's their philosophy and their seva combined. The first level is Grisom, G-I-R-I-S-O, which is 4-word. Now, in their philosophy, 4-word means the word, understand, not F-O-R-W-A-R-D, but W-O-R-D. It is the word that's in front of you. It's the simple word. It's obvious. That's why it's called the 4-word. By the way, these 4 stages and the 3 levels in our system here are also universal stages of human growth and development. You cannot develop pedagogy or transformative systems unless you know how people grow and develop. There's stages of growth and development. And one reason why Western education works the way it is it only deals with one dimension, which is the mind. But the European has only been around a very short period of time and does not understand the full stages of human growth and development. In fact, you'll see in a minute, PhDs in the European system only go to the first level in this Dogon system, only the first level. So 4-word is in any area of life, in literature, in mathematics, in science, in family rearing, in leadership, I don't care, in sports, whatever it is, because this affects all areas of life. It's the fundamental truths of that domain, the basic truth. You can't be good at anything unless you master the fundamentals. And 4-word is not just the technique, if you're an athlete, of running. If you're a football player, of blocking. If you're a scientist, of physics or chemistry. If you're a mathematician, of basic math and algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus. But it's also mastering the fundamentals of good character that go along with the mastery of the technique. You can't have one without the other, okay? So the Grisom stage is the fundamental stage at every level. Venneso means side word, V-E-N-N-E-S-O, side word. Side word is on the side. It's not as obvious. So it suggests that it's not as clear, that it takes peripheral vision to see it. It's not easy to get, but it's still simple knowledge. But it's more advanced knowledge because it comes after the most simple. And it's learned by building on the most simple knowledge. Now put it this way. We know in all learning processes, you know, while we say that black children learn holistically, the truth is, though we learn holistically, we learn in pieces when we're learning anything. If you're learning how to walk, you fall, you stumble, you know, you get up, you hold on to something. If you're learning language, you know, you're learning pieces of the language. If you're learning something about history, you're learning pieces of the history. And over a period of time, you're able to put it together. And what happens at the Venneso stage is you're beginning to link up the pieces. And at least you're beginning to get some idea of how they work. Fundamentals, okay? Now you'll understand this better when I translate this to our culture. Because though we be an African people in America. We have evolved a culture that is both African, but it is also uniquely suited for our own survival. So what you'll see here is that these first 2 stages, Grisom and Venneso, conform in African American popular culture and classical culture to the first stage, which is called imitation. Walter Bishop, when he described the first stage of developing a classical musician, so-called jazz musician, he made the point that the way you develop an excellent musician is this musician picks 1 or 2 masters and they imitate that master. And they imitate that master until they are like that master. They'll walk like the master, talk like the master, feel like the master, and think like the master. But the key thing is they'll master the fundamentals that the master master. Malcolm X was my Venneso master. I wear a goatee to this day because Malcolm wore it. I used to speak just like Malcolm. You understand? The book I wrote on the political legacy of Malcolm X, I sent it to every publisher in the country. They wouldn't publish it, which was good because I wanted to in the end anyway. But the fact is, when I first wrote the book, I couldn't separate myself from Malcolm because he was a spiritual father. This is the way it works. I'm going to put up here in a minute and show you how it's worked with some of the masters. So the thing is, imitation, whether you're a leader, whether you're an artist, whether you're a mathematician, whatever your calling is in life, the mastery of the fundamentals conforms to imitating the fundamental truths. Now here's the point. This pedagogy, or seba, any seba or method of transformation that's universal has got to be tied into the best teacher. The best teacher's the mother. How does a child learn? They learn through what? Imitating their mother. When does imitation begin? In the womb. And if the mother's sending the right messages, the fetus gets the messages. I know sisters who have felt the embryo and have felt who they're going to be. And they literally became that. Now you could say they turned them into that, maybe. But I think that they were sensitive to what they were carrying. They were sensitive that a spirit picked them. And that they were the best opportunity for that embryo and then that child to grow and develop. It is no accident that you have the parents you have. Even the negative things in our parents, they're there for us to learn. Everything is a classroom in this lifetime. You may frown, but I think it's true. In fact, the things you're going to remember most in life are the negatives. And it's what you learn from the negatives. But the key thing here is that imitation, which is the first stage of human growth and development in any stage of learning. You're going to learn how to drive. How do you learn how to drive? You imitate somebody driving. Is that right? Until it becomes second nature. This is a stage in universal human growth and development. It's not only the baby, but every time you learn something new, you become like a child again. And that's good. Children are wise because they have this amazement about life. And when you lose this amazement, you cease to learn. Isn't that true? Teaching is learning. And every good teacher is inspired because every time they got new students in the classroom and there's going to be new experiences that are changed. It's changed. So the thing is, it's not only imitation as the fundamental for a skill. It's imitation as the first stage in human growth and development, but it's the foundational stage at any level of growth and development. Now, and the key thing is, here's the point. The reason why Western systems are information, African systems are apprenticeship systems. And now we call them mentors. And we need to get rid of this term mentor because it comes from the Greeks. It's referring to Greeks who held the children when other Greeks went to war. Anybody can be a mentor. The people who provide the model here are masters. And you do not hook up with anybody to master the fundamentals unless they happen to be a master in their field. I picked Malcolm because he's the best mind we produced in the 20th century. One of the two best leaders we produced in this country in the 20th century, Garvey being the other one. So I was naturally drawn to him. I didn't know anything about this system, but I knew I didn't want to be a chump. I wanted to be the best. And because I'm also a thinker and a leader, I picked a person who was similar to me. This is the other thing about imitation. You are drawn to the masters that match you. It's a natural process. This natural process is now being disrupted by peer groups, by the intrusion of white culture. And so now we have peer groups raising up young people. And I'm not knocking them for that. It's because young people need love, so they're coming together and giving it to each other. But the fact of the matter is, somebody that has not achieved mastery in something cannot develop a master. And that's why it's real key that we understand this system. It's a natural system, but it's in our culture. So imitation, see, I'm going fast. There's a whole lot more to this. I'm just giving you the surface. So it moves from imitation. So imitation conforms to the first 2 degrees in the Dogon system. And this is really the way you understand it. Grisom and Venneso. Imitation is the first stage where you're learning the fundamentals of anything, right? And it encompasses both Grisom, the forward simple knowledge, and Venneso, the sideward. Simple, but still peripheral. I knew this when I read Walter Bishop because I knew the way I learned Dogon philosophy was imitating it, imitating the principles, until I became like them. And in the philosophy, you're drawn to the principles you need the most. Dogon philosophy is the philosophy that shaped me because it's a system that's still alive. And the Dogon stressed the masculine-feminine principle. You know, the principles of balance, the principles of justice. I'm a warrior. I was good at dealing with the masculine side, not so good at the feminine side. So I had to work on that. It took a lot of time. And so in my relationships, I had to work out. I've been married 30 years. I had to learn a lot. You know what I mean? And don't play around either. Ain't got no time. You know what I mean? Difficult enough, you know, take care of one woman. I don't want to take care of 2 or 3. One's enough for me, you know? So the thing is, the philosophy is learned through becoming the truth. And it's a transformative process. It takes time. And I want to really stress this also, that Grisom and Venneso, and the next stage I'm going to talk about also, apprenticing under masters, which you're drawn to because they meet your needs. Me, I was drawn to Malcolm because he met my needs. You're going to see Henrik Clarke, and then we put this screen up here. I interviewed John for the last 8 months of his life on his apprenticeship system under Arthur Schoenberg. You are drawn to the masters that meet your needs. But here's the point. Preparing for, listen to this, folks, because this is why this room ain't full of it. Preparing for your destiny or your ka or your ori in life, your purpose in life, which are, you know, your inherent gifts, is inseparable from being prepared to know who you are. So these two go on hand in hand. When I was apprenticing under Malcolm, I wasn't only learning leadership, I was learning how to be an African. When Henrik Clarke, you know, apprenticed under Arthur Schoenberg, he wasn't just learning scholarship, he was learning how to be an African. Y'all understand what I'm telling you? So you can't separate the identification process from the specialization skill process. They go on at the same time. And identification, re-identification from Negro to Africa requires you be dead in one state, be reborn into another. You know what I mean? Be, you know, die as a Negro, be reborn as a black person and as an African. And, you know, in the 60s we had a saying, and every Negro is a potential African. And today we got a lot of people running around calling themselves black and African who are dead Negroes. Am I telling the truth? Who are playing the same kind of games that Negroes have always played, defining themselves according to the values of others, seeing themselves through the eyes of others. So the first stage is imitation. It conforms to the first 2 levels in Dogon philosophy, Grisom and Venneso. The third stage in Dogon philosophy is Boloso. Boloso. It means backward. It's the word that's hidden. You can't see it. And what this means is, these are the deeper truths. It takes years to get to Boloso. Years. But here's the key thing. The way Boloso is learned is through synthesis. Whereas things were learned in pieces before, and you start to bring them together, in order for you to get to the level of Boloso, if you're going to be an athlete, let's say you're a runner, you know, a track and field person, you know, 50-yard dash. You know, you learn things about how to get your butt down, you know, how to get off at the right start. And you learn it in pieces, but after a while, it all comes together. Mathematics, you know, you'll learn the pieces of math, but eventually it all comes together. Driving, you learn it in pieces, but eventually it all comes together. It's synthesis. But see, at the higher level, synthesis is bringing yourself together, the internal self together. Now, you understand this better when we go to our culture. See, I say our, because we're the same, but we're also different. We had to stress certain things so we could move forward in the world. Every African people are like this. We African, but we ain't all identically the same. Isn't that true? You better believe it. There's a lot of West Indians here, you know, Caribbean. Africans got juju, voodoo, hoodoo, all kinds of dudes, isn't that right? So there be some black folks afraid of that stuff, but we got it too. They just got more of it because they're more in touch with this African culture. So that's something they draw on. Now the thing is, Boloso conforms to, and you don't like this term, but I'm being truthful to Walter Bishop, then I'll give you the real meaning. It conforms to the second stage in African American culture. The musicians call it assimilation. But not integration, not the merging of races,